Stranger Things, one of the most watched series in the world. But it isn't famous only for its actors. It's especially known for the VFX inside it. So I decided to set myself a personal challenge: to recreate the VFX of Stranger Things with a $0 budget. In total, it took me 6 months to recreate the scenes. Did I manage to do it? As the first scene, I decided to recreate the Creel house from Stranger Things. With the help of reference images, I started building the exterior structure of the house. Then moved on to creating the columns and the porch. Aligning the ceiling to the columns. Placing the various details on the edges. Rotating and aligning them at the same distance from one another. I then modeled the windows. Using the Boolean tool, I removed the inner part of the window, leaving the outer frame and adding bars. Then, moving on to creating the roof of the house and its details. Once I added the textures and placed the various plants, I moved on to modeling the grass in front of the house, making room for the sidewalk and the driveway, paying particular attention to the stairs, keeping the distance between each step identical. Finally adding the textures to the stairs, making sure they were not stretched, therefore adjusting their scale, without forgetting the garden in front of the house, with the iconic rocket slide and the swing. After completing the house scene, I started building the second main scene of the video. I placed all the houses along the sides of the street, making sure they were all different from one another. Then adding the missing textures to the houses, making sure the colors matched that era. I refined the grass details so that the various gaps would not be visible. In sculpting mode, using the grab tool, I flattened the shape of the grass so that it looked almost like a perfect surface, and added many trees behind the houses to create that realistic effect, and fill the empty spaces that would otherwise make the scene look like it had no real background. I then moved on to adding cars in the driveways, rotating them so they would appear properly resting on the asphalt, adding more along the sides of the road while making sure they were all from the 1980s. And finally the last details, such as hedges, making their positions as random as possible and different from each other. Adding more trees in the front yards, trash cans on the sidewalks, and American-style mailboxes. Now, we move on to the most important scene of the entire video, the scene in Vecna's attic. I started by modeling the walls, then extruded the windows to let light enter from outside, continuing by adding the beams around the room. Thanks to the array tool, I had to rotate the planks so they would match the slope of the roof. It was a long process because everything had to be aligned perfectly. I then moved on to adding the props, such as wooden boxes, pallets, candles, a piano, and other objects positioned faithfully to the original scene. I did not model these objects myself, but found them already made on the Sketchfab website. After finishing the floor details, I placed pallets in front of the windows to filter the incoming light, obviously tilting them so that light could pass through. I adjusted the position of other objects and boxes. Thanks to geometry nodes, I created vines on the walls that generated automatically, then adjusted their positions. I drew on the floor the paths that the vines would follow, and gave them the correct texture with reflections and imperfections. Since in the series, the vines could be seen wrapped around the wooden beams, I recreated them as well. I adjusted the way the light entered through the cracks in the ceiling by cutting the pallets as if they were split apart. Using both the Boolean modifier and the displace modifier to create that cracked wood effect. Finally, I positioned the lights and used a volumetric scatter to create that foggy atmosphere. Moving on to Vecna, I modeled the Season 5 version myself, wanting to create this contrast between a Season 4 attic scene with the much more evolved Season 5 version of Vecna. As you can see, in order to animate him, I assigned weights to every part of the body, using weight paint and assigning each body section either red or blue, so that during animation, it would be easier to identify which bone corresponded to which name. I then added the tentacles attached to his body. I also had to create the previous animation in which the tentacles moved. I created a simple, bendy bone rig to make them move exactly how I wanted, attached the rig to the tentacle mesh, so they became a single object. Once animated, the rig itself would no longer be visible in the final render. It was a long process attaching the tentacles to Vecna's body, because frame by frame I had to move the points where the tentacles connected to his body, while Vecna floated, since they had to support him in the air. But once this process was complete, I had finished the attic scene. I duplicated the Creel house scene and transformed it into the upside down. I replaced the trees in the exact same positions as the original scene, because it had to feel like a mirrored version of the house, but with a horror atmosphere. So I removed the leaves from the trees. I added wooden pallets to the windows to stay consistent with the attic scene. Using a principled volume, I recreated the atmosphere of the upside down, thanks to the ground fog and the blue color given to the sky. For the scene where the Demogorgon runs, I used keyframe animation to make it move. This too was a frame-by-frame process done manually. I built the forest scene around it, duplicating the trees so it would be impossible to see where the scene ended, using elements from the upside-down house scene, such as the fog and the dark blue atmosphere, to create that horror feeling. However, I modified the ground by adding a mud texture. Added particles floating in the air, just like in the series. Then adjusted the positions of the trees so the forest would not appear too dense, and adjusted the lights on the Demogorgon to create a rim light effect on its skin. To create the animation properly, I assigned weights to every part of its body using the weight paint tool. For the title sequence, I moved into After Effects. I used the same font as the original title from the series, animating each letter one by one so they appeared at the correct moment. One from above, one from the right, using keyframe animation. With textures and masks, I modified the red light inside them. Each letter had to have a different lighting effect from the others. I repeated the process for every letter in the title. Instead of Stranger Things, it would say Blender Things. I then added my name, and here is the final result of the video.
There's a place in my heart for you, that's the bottom line.
I am quite proud of the final result. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. See you in the next VFX.